evening, everyone. My name is Otunba Kemi Agbeke. I'm the moderator for today. I welcome everyone to this seminar, which is powered by OPU Canada chapter. The topic for today is general immigration. You know, this general immigration will enable us to take care of our immigration matters and to ensure that the
immigration Canada Commission.
It's okay.
I welcome our guest speakers, Mr. Johnson Babalola and Mr. Tosi Falai from Softmarket, Anthony, Canada. And welcome everyone. Before we start, I would like to express our sincere appreciation to the executive under the leadership of our able coordinator, Mr. Olumide Fatuashe, the BOD, Baba Odua and Iya Odua, and the entire member of OPU Canada. We couldn't have done this without you guys. We say thank you so much. I will now call on chairman, if chairman of BOD is there, to give us the opening prayer. BOD chairman?
Yeah, hello, I'm here.
Can you please give us the opening prayer, sir?
Okay, let us pray. Dear Lord, thank you for these days, for the presence of everyone in this meeting. But once again, we are gathered and given the opportunity to appreciate life and your words. Forgive us for our shortcomings and cleanse our heart as we are learning and live your word and example. Father, bless our endeavors, especially today's meeting. May you guide us in our decision, and may you enlighten our minds in every decision that we make. Give us your grace, and that we may effectively do our part for your greatest glory. All this we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. I should go.
Oui. Il faut préparer l'oreille. On ne peut pas de sauce dans le frigo. Ok.
C'est la palomie.
La mamie là, hein,
c'est il faut regarder si c'était ça.
So, Otunba,
go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much, our BOD chairman. Thank you for the beautiful prayer. Next in the agenda is the roll call by Mr. Oladide Olateru, our able secretary. Over to you, sir.
I don't know what made me say. Let me just say.
That's so no. When he's quiet like that,
I'm going to mute everybody now, please.
You already test.
Yeah. We say thank you to all our special guests and everybody that is here. In order to save our time, because if we have to start calling our names one after the other, it's going to take a while. I would advise that we all try and put our names on the chat. Please put your real name, because we have some people that joined without their names. So please kindly join. Kindly put in the chat your full name so that we can acknowledge and recognize you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, all.
Good afternoon, sir. You are welcome, sir. Baba Odua, Canada chapter. Otunba Wale Adepoju. You are welcome, sir.
Good afternoon.
Can we go ahead, the able secretary?
Yes, please go ahead, ma'am.
Okay. Now I would like to call on our coordinator, Mr. Olumide Fatuashe, to give us the opening remark. Go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Coordinator, please unmute yourself, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you,
Yes,
sir.
sir, we can hear you, sir.
Okay, good afternoon. I welcome you all to today's program, SAB General Immigration. I want to welcome all the members of OPU Canada, starting from the Chairman Board of Directors, the Secretary, the Deputy, and all my able members to this program. As we promised you in January when we were rolling out the programs that we wanted to achieve this year. This seminar based on immigration is one of it, and we do promise that it's going to come between October and November. And with the grace of God, God has made it possible for us to be able to do it. And so that all people who are having one immigration issue or the other, we have the opportunity to start from the experience from our seasoned lawyers that are here today to educate us, to enlighten us, to point us to direction we should go concerning all these issues we are having. I want to welcome lawyer Johnson Babalola and his team to our midst. I think he's here with Mr. Tosin Falaye. You are welcome, sir. And we do appreciate you coming to do this. It's a community service. You're not taking a dime from us, and you have agreed to help the community out in the areas that we might be having questions or difficulties to areas that we are having difficulties, the terrains that we did not know. So you have done this. God will reward you abundantly and replenish your purse. And as you come to do this as a community service, God will reward you abundantly. Will not take most of your time. I just want to welcome everybody, and please do enjoy the program. And when it is time for question and answer, everybody that has questions on any immigration issues can ask our lawyers, and they will be glad to answer us. Thank you very much. God bless.
Thank you, our able coordinator, Mr. Olumide Fatuashe. You've said it all. You've said it all. In our next agenda, we are in agenda 6. We have the brief presentation of different immigration options. Before I call on our first speaker, I would like to tell you the options of asking questions. You know, after our 2 guest speakers, after they have spoken, so you will have the opportunity to ask any immigration question, and the speakers will try their best to answer the question that you might have in mind. So when you want, we have 2 options. One, you can type the question in the chat box using the emoji and the Zoom chat, or you can raise your hand. So we call on you to ask the question. So now the two speakers will now respond to the questions. So before I introduce my first speaker, which is Mr. Johnson Babalola, it is with great honor I introduce you, the first speaker, Mr. Johnson Babalola. Mr. Johnson Babalola is also known as JB, is the group managing partner, Topke Anthony in Canada. He's a well-known Toronto lawyer who has carved a niche in immigration and refugee law practice. He has appeared before the Federal Court of Canada and a variety of tribunals. He writes on immigration and settlement matters. Johnson Babalola is committed to advocacy for immigrants and quality education of the workforce as a platform for global development. He is a member in good standing of the Law Society of Upper Canada. Mr. Babalola, over to you, sir. Let's join us together to welcome Mr. Johnson Babalola. Over to you, sir, Mr. Babalola.
Thank you so much, Otumba. Nice to see you again, and nice to see a number of people here that I know and those that I don't know. My colleague Tosin Falaye will be speaking soon after me with respect to Top Market, what we do, and then the programs, immigration programs that are available in Canada. And I hope everyone can hear me properly. Can you hear me very well?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. And
yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you so much. So my role in starting this off is pretty simple. I want everyone to understand a few things when it comes to immigration to Canada, or even immigration to anywhere in the world. There's no country in the world that will open its door to everyone to just come in. I mean, it's just it doesn't work that way. So if anyone comes to you and says that Canada needs 50,000 people, no requirements, just fill this form, pay whatever money in dollars or in naira, and then bring your passport and here you go. You have to really think twice and ask yourself, will a country just open its door to everyone to just come in? So there are some things I would like you to bear in mind for all our participants and for people to also pass along. Every potential immigrant should do his or her own work properly. If you can think, you should be able to also think through this and ask questions. And so if somebody says A, B, C to you, ask questions. There are government websites, Canadian immigration websites that you can go into and check some facts, check some information about whatever is available out there and compare with what anyone is saying to you. So that's very important. So homework is important. Secondly, ask yourself some of those critical questions. Having gone through the websites and the information there, then ask yourself, am I qualified? If I'm not qualified now, then what do I need to do to qualify maybe 1 year down the road, 2 years down the road? Sometimes it might just require that you go back to school and do a first degree, or go back to school and do a master's, or have 1 extra year of work experience. So patience is very important. Sometimes a lot of us are not patient. I want it now. And that is why a lot of people fall into the hands of those that will take advantage of them. So that's extremely important to keep to heart. The other thing that is also important, which I say to a lot of people, is that, when you are looking for good advice, sometimes you might need to pay for it. So when you seek out a professional who knows what he or she is doing, and he or she asks you to pay for consultation for his or her time, don't say, oh, but I just want to ask you a couple of questions. Those 2 questions you are asking, that's all that guy is there to do. He or she does not sell rice or beans. He or she is there to basically impart knowledge and guide you properly. So don't think about just seeking for free advice here and there without wanting to pay for proper advice. And again, I emphasize proper advice because sometimes you might also pay for some advice that are fake. So be very careful. Referrals is always very important. If someone refers someone to you, that really helps a lot. And the other thing that I wanted to say to everyone as we get started is that don't you ever think that when you make an application to come to Canada under whatever program or grant, if that application is refused for one reason or the other, don't think that's the end of the road. Challenge that decision. Be prepared to challenge that decision. Every immigration decision can be challenged. I just want you to know that, because sometimes people don't know that. Because some of the decisions will say you cannot appeal this decision. Yes, you might not be able to appeal it, but you can go to federal court and seek for what we call a judicial review of that decision. So Maybe somewhere down the road we'll speak briefly about the difference between an appeal and a judicial review application at the federal court. But you need to understand that at the federal court, basically, it's only lawyers here that can go to federal court for you, not just anyone, unless you want to self-represent. So that's important for you to know, that not everything that once a decision is made, then you say, oh, that's it. God has brought this decision to be like this. No, officers make mistakes. Officers are human beings. They mess up, so to say, from time to time. And then so you want to challenge their decisions. The other thing that's also important is that you need to know the difference between a lawyer and a consultant. So immigration lawyers, immigration consultants. Many people here will know, when we say a lawyer, someone who had been to school for many, many years to study law and had been called to the bar in that country. Meanwhile, a consultant, generally, a consultant is someone who had studied immigration for about 6 months. And I'm not saying that, one of the things, let me rephrase that. Some consultants are very good, don't get me wrong, some lawyers are very good, so it's like that, but there's a difference between both. So lawyers have been to school for many, many years to study immigration, and some consultants have been to school for 6 months to study immigration. But there are good consultants out there. There are also, bad ones. There are also bad lawyers and good lawyers. But the bottom line is that, again, you need to do your homework. What is important, though, for you to know is that consultants cannot go to federal court to challenge decisions for you. They can do some appeals for you, but they cannot go to federal court to seek for a judicial review of a decision that has been refused for you. Only lawyers can do that. I also wanted people to also know that, please, when you are making an application, provide genuine documents. It's extremely important for you to be honest, to be truthful, and to provide genuine documents, and also be transparent about your immigration history. If you have been refused visas to some other countries in the past, please make sure you complete the forms properly. A lot of people that are refused, actually from Nigeria, one of the grounds for refusal is because, for instance, if you have been refused a visa to the US and then they ask you, have you been refused visa to any other country? You say no. Then they find out that that could be a problem. You can actually be barred from applying to Canada for about 5 years. So be honest, be truthful, and think deep before you answer any question. Then finally, make sure you have copies of all applications that are made on your behalf. It's very important for you to ask whoever is representing you, can I have a copy of the submissions you've made on my behalf? They serve some purposes. Number one, you can review those. If there are some errors on them, you can always say, oh, my date of birth is wrong. Can we correct this, please? Or you also want to have those copies just in case you need them for whatever the reason might be in future. So these are all the things that I wanted everyone to keep in mind, and not just give your file to people, close your eyes, go to bed, and forget about it. No. So that would be my opening remark, and thank you very much for this opportunity. We do not take it for granted, and I will pass the baton on to Otumba. Or do you want me to just go straight to Tosin to start
Okay, you want Mr. Tosin to start the presentation? Yes. Or you, sir? Or who?
He will be starting the presentation.
The presentation, okay. All right, let me call on Mr. Johnson, Mr. Tosin. Okay.
Okay. Can I go ahead?
Oh, yeah, yes. Can you go ahead, sir? Mr. Tosin, I just want to introduce you to check your profile. Oh, hold on. Mr. Tosin, yes. Mr. Tosin, it is a great pleasure for me to introduce Mr. Tosin Falaye. Mr. Tosin Falaye is the Senior Associate of Topmark Anthony in Canada. He's a result-oriented and driven legal professional with key practice focus and interest in corporate commercial dispute resolution, litigation, and arbitration. He is an experienced advocate with hands-on experience representing a diverse crop of clients before trials and appellate courts, as well as alternative dispute resolution panels in mediation, negotiation, and arbitration proceedings. Mr. Tosin Falaye, the floor is all yours, sir. Can you go ahead?
Thank you very much, ma'am. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, or good evening, good morning, depending on what part of the world you're joining us from. I see folks here from various parts of Africa, so and it's good evening in that sense. Thank you very much again to the Oodua People's Congress for the Canadian chapter for giving us this opportunity to, as we like to do at Top Marquee Attorneys, to interact with our community. Like you had rightly noted, corporate social responsibility. We believe that information is power, and it's important to assist in the best ways we can to get information out to our community. Just trying to, okay, I wanted to share my screen because I have some slides to go through, so I want to see if we can get access to that. So while we do that, I'll just sort of start speaking about some of these things, and in the hope that I will be able to share my screen so that people can also follow visually some of the things that I'm talking about. There is no doubt that Canada is one of the most sought after countries in terms of people seeking to resettle, start afresh, start a new life here. And some of those reasons are not far-fetched. Canada is one of the most developed countries in the world. The standard of living here is top-notch. There is healthcare available in a class of its own compared to other countries. Canada has a diverse set of people. I remember my first time walking through the downtown of Toronto. You could hardly tell where exactly it is you were. You find Black people, find South Asians, Asians, East Asians, people from Europe, people from America, all sorts of people. Canada is more or less like a melting point, a melting pot, as they say, for all sorts of people. And it's an accommodating country. So many people want to move here and settle to start life afresh. For us as a law firm, we are a team of legal minds that have a ton of experience representing clients in immigration matters. Like Mr. Babala rightly noted, we represent clients in before various forums, administrative tribunals, and the courts as well. We have a legacy of excellence as we make a difference daily and develop the strongest array of talent. So if you do decide to work with Top Marquee Attorneys, for example, you will be assured of getting professionals who know their stuff. So in that sense, that's really who we are. And one of our major areas of practice is immigration and refugee protection law, so as well as citizenship as well. So again, it's that experience that we bring to the table. Having laid that background and foundation, there are several areas of immigration, various pathways that people can explore in terms of their desires, fulfilling their goals and objectives of moving to Canada to start a new life. Particularly given the interesting times that we are with the pandemic, there have been several developments, new public policies, given the impact of the pandemic on people migrating, people's ability to come into the country and things like that. As a result of that, the federal government of Canada has developed several public policies that sort of made available extra options for people who mostly were in Canada at the time of the pandemic to sort of transition to have a more secure future in Canada. The interesting thing about that is with the pandemic sort of changing, we have the vaccine now. The country is trying to reopen. Some of those public policies are sort of winding down. I will touch on those later, but in a general sense, I will go through I'll call them the regular pathways that would usually have as ways to come into Canada so that people can get a broad sense as to what would apply across the board. And towards the end, I would also talk about some of the public policies, most of which have either ended or are ending in a couple of weeks. So that said, one very popular, I won't call it major, very popular pathway for people to come to Canada is something called the Express Entry Skilled Workers Program. It's a point-based system whereby people are able to move to Canada as permanent residents from their countries of residence, their countries of citizenship, based on the work experience that they have, either as this is a Yoruba platform, so permit me to use that word. It has folks that we would call in the Yoruba parlance, in that sense, or people who have develops a wealth of experience as in white-collar roles, skilled workers, we call it, or for the initial awards, skilled trade programs. There's also something called the Canadian Experience Class, which is basically based on the experience you've gathered in Canada for at least 1 year, gives you a pathway to move to Canada as a permanent resident based on your skilled work experience. All of the systems that I've just mentioned basically deal on what I call a point-based system. So you get assessed based on your experience, your ability to communicate in Canada's official languages. Unlike Nigeria, we have just one official language, English. Canada is a bilingual society, and the official languages include French and English. So if you're able to, or you're proficient in speaking English or French, you've done the test, you get assessed, you get awarded points on that. You get awarded points as well for your education, your ability to show that if you come to Canada, you're not going to be a burden to the society, at least for the transition phase of your resettling in Canada. What does that mean? Do you have the resources to provide for yourself upon arriving in Canada in such a way that you will not become a burden to the public? So we want to see how much you have and things like that, how you're able to cater for your family. I'm just going to give it another try to see if I can share now. Yes, I can. Okay, so do this way. Okay, so yeah, so I was talking about the skilled workers program, and that's it in terms of the various elements on which you get ranked points. So when you get enough points in the pool, you have enough experience. Canada usually does a draw. Most times it's done bi-weekly, and Canada draws from those people and invites people to apply for permanent residence. You provide your supporting documents to back up the points that you have paid. Like Mr. Babala said at the beginning, it's important that people are able to show genuine documents because these documents are usually investigated, background check is done. If your documents do not tally with what it is you claimed as points, then you find yourself having problems in that sense. There's also the skilled trade program, and similar to the federal skilled worker program, the skilled trade program looks at you being able to work in a particular vocation in Canada. So are you qualified to work as a carpenter, as a cake baker, as a plumber? Depending on what it is you have, and you have the certificate of qualification for that trade, you're also able to speak in English. You meet the other requirements in terms of admissibility to Canada. You could also get invited to apply for permanent residence in Canada based on this program as well. And lastly, the Canadian Experience Class. Again, that depends on the experience you've gathered in Canada. So whether it's as in a trade in Canada or in a skilled work position, the white collar job as it is, you have at least 1 year experience working in Canada, you may be eligible to immigrate to Canada under this pathway. There's also, different from the Express Entry program, there's also pathways for investors, folks who may otherwise not qualify under this program, either because of your age or you just don't want to go through the stress of having to have your education assessed. You maybe didn't do too well in English, depending on what it is, but you have funds that you're willing to bring to Canada in terms of investment to help the economy grow. If you follow the news in Canada, you will know that immigration is one of the economic drivers in Canada. I know recently the Premier of the province of Ontario was making statements about the labor shortages that we have here in Ontario and the desire of the province to welcome people who are willing to fill up these labor shortages. And one of those ways is the investor program. So depending on what your net worth is and the amount of funds you have to invest in Canada, this may also open up doors for you in terms of moving to Canada as permanent resident. So for investment thresholds, various provinces have their various programs. The federal government has its own program, like the startup visa program and things like that. But if one is looking to invest in Canada, you're looking at between 150,000 Canadian dollars and 1.2 million Canadian dollars, depending on the province you want to go to. So I would say to you that if this is an avenue you think you would be willing to explore, it's important to get yourself a professional who would help you navigate between the options that may be available to you. For some of the provinces, the amounts you invest are done in a manner that you provide that fund to the government, and government guarantees that you get your funds back after a number of years. But if you choose to set up a business, you have an understanding to provide a certain amount of, or invest a certain amount of funds into setting up that business, and province decides to support you towards permanent residence. So again, various provinces have various programs, and you can always navigate this through the help of a professional. Provincial nominee programs, right? With provincial nominee program, there's some sort of relationship between this and the express entry program as well. Some provincial nominee programs run on their own merit, but essentially what this means is, rather than going to the federal government to start out, you can apply to particular provinces who may be looking to accept somebody with your skills, or to fill labor shortages in that province, whether it's the province of Manitoba, Ontario, Alberta, whatever province it is. You apply through their systems, and if you get selected or nominated by that province, you either in the express entry system get 600 points, which most likely guarantee you an invitation to apply for permanent residence, or depending on the category of provincial nomination you pursue, you would have to do something called a paper-based application. A paper-based application, different from the express entry system, is you fill the forms on paper, you mail them to the immigration processing office, your application is processed from there. On the other hand, the express entry system works online. You provide your application electronically, you submit the forms online, and that is transmitted to the immigration office that will process your application. So that's one difference to bear in mind between the express entry system, provincial nominee programs that are not tied into the express entry system. But more times than not, the skilled worker programs that are done by provinces are usually tied to the express entry program. So whether it is you're applying for a professional position, a position that is seen as a skilled role, as against a lower skilled role, you most likely would have to be dealing with the express entry system. So just to put that in perspective, Canada has different categories of occupation. There's occupation 0, which is for managers, people at managerial level. Occupations A and B, people with some level of skill in terms of their profession. So whether you've completed a university degree or you've completed a skilled trade, you will likely fall between categories A and B. On the other hand, for lower skilled positions, things like a ready example would be like a caregiver, a personal support worker. Those are within category C and D. So if you're seeking provincial nomination, either you've gotten a job in a province to provide care to people, you get nominated in category C and D, you'd likely have to do a paper-based application process. Now, Canada, just like Nigeria, runs a federal system. Each states have their own, sorry, not states, provinces. Each provinces have their own system of immigration that are subservient to the federal one. But because of the relationship Quebec has with the federal government of Canada, Quebec is sort of distinct from the federal government program in a sense. So Quebec administers its own immigration programs and has its own selection criteria, which are different and from the federal government programs, as well as those of most of the other provinces. So similar to the federal government, though, they have a skilled entrepreneur program, the skilled worker program, as well as the investor program. So again, it will take, depending on your interest, possibly you're someone who is proficient in French, you're interested in settling in Quebec, that provides you an alternative in the event that you're unable to get in through programs done by the other provinces or the federal government. You can look at what is available in Quebec and explore where that's possibly needed. Now, there's also a program called the Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot. Again, the essential drive of this program by the federal government is to drive economic development to rural areas in Canada. So places up north, places that tend to be colder than places down south. People don't like to go there, but the government understands that development needs to happen across the board. So to encourage people to go there, this Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot is in place so that if you get support from those communities, for example, you've gotten an admission to a university or a college in a rural area that has been identified by this program, you finish your program, that community decides to support you to possibly get work experience or transition from being a student to a permanent resident. This could also provide you a pathway to permanent residence in Canada. And just to bear in mind, it's not every rural community in Canada that has this program applicable to them. Certain communities have been selected and identified under this program. Communities like Sudbury, communities like Timmins, Cornwall, those sort of rural communities have been identified as beneficiaries under this program. So if you take advantage of this program, it's important to note the specific communities that you can benefit from if you want to explore this pathway. Now, caregiver programs. Again, Canada places value on people being able to provide care for the vulnerable in society. And because of that, certain pathways have been created in this under the broad, let's call it the broad caregiver program. Some of them have been stopped. The one that's still in place now is called the home support worker and the home child caregiver pilot, whereby if you have a need at home, whether it's for an elderly person who is vulnerable, or a child who may have some disabilities, or a child who needs a person to be available to support. This could also provide a pathway for people outside of Canada to obtain jobs, be employed, and move to Canada to get a work permit that eventually transitions them to PR, to permanent resident status, as the case may be. Now, it's also important to bear in mind that it's not every caregiver occupation that is eligible under this program. Specifically, the occupations that are eligible under the caregiver program will be, like I mentioned, the child care provider, which is occupation 4411, or the home support worker, which is occupation 4412. It's important to note that you don't necessarily, as of today, you don't necessarily need to have some certification in any of this profession. As long as you're able to show that you have the ability to do the job, you could be employable and eligible for this program. So what am I talking about essentially? You don't have to say, for example, be an auxiliary nurse or any of those things to be eligible for this program. But if you're able to show Canadian immigration that you have the experience or you have the ability from things you've done in the past, maybe you work as a children's church worker, or you're responsible for looking after children in community centers and things like that, you could, based on that experience, get an employment in Canada for people who need caregivers in their homes or support homes, as the case may be, and be eligible to apply for a work permit under this pathway as well. Now, aside from the programs that lead you to PR or through a work permit from outside of the country, certain people who may not have any desire to live or permanently settle in Canada have the opportunity to settle or move to Canada to take advantage of Canada's highly developed education system. Or it would also offer you a pathway to transition to PR if you get into Canada on a study permit. So if you're a person who's interested in pursuing further education in Canada, a study permit is what you need. You need to get an admission from a designated learning institution. Some of the requirements to show the officer that you are eligible for a study permit is to have a valid passport, have the ability to pay for your education, or if you obtain a scholarship, show that your scholarship is genuine. Other documents in terms of your criminal record from the country or other countries you lived in. Important to show the officer that at the end of your studies in Canada, you do intend to return to your country of residence. That's a very important thing that gets people refused a lot, especially when it comes to study permit. So are you able to show that you're established in your country? Do you have things going on for you? For example, do you have a job? The program you want to come to study in Canada, does it provide you with economic prospects in your country such that you will be motivated to return to your country at the end of your studies? Those are some of the things to bear in mind when you applying for a study permit. So it's also important to note that getting that visa that allows you to come to Canada to get a study permit is not, or being approved on your study permit is not enough for you to enter into Canada. When you get approved on your study permit, you probably have to send your passport, depending on the country you're applying from, to the immigration officer to stamp a visa on it. That visa allows you to travel. When you get to Canada, the border services officer would review the documents and make that final determination whether or not to grant you a study permit. So we have situations whereby people who have been approved for their study permit got a visa, took the flight, arrived in Canada. Upon being examined by the officer at the border, the officer finds out things about them that ultimately leads them not to grant them that study permit. So it's important that when you're making that journey to Canada, you have genuine documents, you're able to show that for all intents and purposes, you remain a genuine student, your admission letter, your letter of acceptance from the school remains valid, and you have the funds to pay your way through your studies. Now, again, aside from the study permits, people could also choose to come to Canada for a temporary period of time as visitors to Canada. Getting a visitor's visa allows you coming to Canada to spend at a stretch, depending on the kind of visitor's visa you get, 180 days, or depending on what happens between you and the Canada Border Services officer at the border, a date determined and stated on your passport as the date you must leave the country. Yeah, so I'll skip that for now. It's important, again, just like the study permit, that when you're applying for a visiting visa, you're able to show the officer that you will return to your country at the end of the period you're allowed to come to the country. So if the officer has doubts as to the genuineness of your visiting Canada, that could lead to you being refused or turned back at the border. And many people who watch Canadian television may have heard of something called the Border Security. It's a program that is shown, I think, on CTV, Global Television, and things like that, that shows the experiences of Canadian Border Services officers with visitors coming into Canada, or people coming into Canada generally. There will be that examination, and if you don't pass, the officer is not satisfied that you're a genuine visitor, you ultimately could be refused entry into Canada. Now, different from the regular visitor's visa, you could also get the privilege of getting what is called the grandparent and parent super visa. So, for example, if I'm a Canadian citizen or Canadian permanent resident, I want my parents to come to spend longer than the 180 days that I mentioned previously. Just to take that as a recap, I said earlier that a visitor is usually admitted into Canada for a period of 180 days, which is 6 months. But with a super visa, a grandparent parent can be allowed to stay for 2 years at a stretch, as against the 6 months, 180 days that you will get. But it's important to note that in applying for this visa, there's a certain income threshold you must have, either as a Canadian citizen or as a permanent resident. And it's important to get your parents or grandparents medical insurance for at least the first year of their stay in Canada. Now, I made reference to this when I was talking about the investor options of coming into Canada. There's also something called the Startup Visa Program, which basically targets immigrants who are entrepreneurs and have the ability to set up businesses in Canada. If you are a person who innovates, the business ideas you have can create jobs for other people, you can compete on a global scale, and you're able to get the support of a designated organization. These designated organizations are essentially people that we call them venture capitalists, people who you pitch your idea to. If you see that it's viable, they either provide you with funds or support, and on that basis, you apply to the federal government. So whether it is you want to buy a business or you want to bring in capital, this will offer you a pathway to come into Canada. There's also the language ability, English or French. For programs like this, as against the skilled worker program, the skilled trade program, the English and French threshold is usually lower. But ultimately, you need to show that the funds that you're bringing into Canada, they're genuine. Things like anti-money laundering and things like that would apply here. Canada would look into your funds to see that you're not bringing tainted money into Canada. In addition to this, just to mention, there's also a program called the Intra-Company Transferees. And this may be of interest to several people who may not be able to move as skilled workers or have resources that these programs would require. If you have a business in Nigeria, Ghana, whatever part of the world it is you operate in, and that business is doing pretty well, you want to expand, you could set up a branch or a sister company. And what I mean by a sister company in simple terms is a company that has a relationship with a company that is outside of Canada. So you have a company, the headquarters is, say, in Nigeria. The business is going on good, you think you may do well in Canada, you then come into Canada to incorporate or to set up, register another company that has a relationship with the one outside of Canada. That could also provide you a pathway for a member of staff and employee who they have skilled technical know-how, depending on the business that company does, or somebody in management position who is also employed by that organization to be transferred to Canada to help set up the business here in Canada. So that we call intra-company transferee. And it also provides a pathway for investors, people with business minds, to set up their business and expand their business opportunities here in Canada as well. Now, another way also is what is called family sponsorship, whether you're sponsoring your partner, a common law partner, somebody who you're married to, your parents, grandparents, children, and things like that. This offers you a pathway to move people who are members of your family to Canada. Depending on your income threshold, you could be eligible to be invited to apply for your parents and grandparents. Income thresholds do not apply where you're looking at bringing a spouse. In simple terms, so income may be required depending on a number of factors. For example, is that spouse bringing dependent children who also have dependent children and things like that? Then the government wants to look at, do you have the funds to support these people over a certain period of time? But family sponsorship provides an avenue for folks who have status as permanent residents in Canada or citizens of Canada to bring in their family members under this program as well. It's also important to note that if you are a permanent resident living outside of Canada, you may not be able to sponsor a person, or you're a citizen living outside of Canada, you also may not be able to sponsor a person unless you show that you do have a plan to move back to Canada to get resettled here if the family member you're inviting becomes a permanent resident. That's very important, a very important distinction to put out there. Now, aside from the general pathways that lead you either to get temporary resident status or permanent resident status, as the case may be, there's also situations whereby people are fleeing from persecution in that sense. There's a reason why you're afraid or in danger in your country is unable to provide you protection in that sense. There isn't any other place in the country for you to go and get resettled. Then you may want to look at the possibilities of what is called asylum or refugee protection in Canada. It's important to know that there must be a risk to your life. Maybe you're facing cruel and unusual punishment, either for reasons of your political opinion, your race, your religion, your membership of a social group. All of those reasons may provide you a reason to seek protection in Canada. And this is important because people only hear about refugees and think, oh, people from Afghanistan, for example, and no intention to put people from those countries down. They're facing real issues and things like that. But you may be in a particular situation that may not be palatable for you, and you haven't thought about it from a refugee perspective, or you need to seek protection. It's important in those situations for you to seek counsel, talk to people, and see whether or not those situations may make you eligible to seek protection in Canada. But ultimately, it's important that whatever reason it is you're advancing as a reason to seek protection, it must be genuine, because you would have to prove that this fits into what the law provides as requirements to be eligible for refugee protection in Canada. Again, just to put it in a short perspective, if you're forced to flee your country for one reason or the other, you're able to get to Canada, or even from outside of the country, you are supported by, say, the United Nations Human Rights Commission. You're able to show that you're a person who needs to move to Canada or get resettled in Canada. You may be eligible to become a protected person in Canada, either under the In Canada Asylum Program, the Canadian Refugee Protection Programs, the Humanitarian Resettlement Program, which folks that are experiencing challenges with the takeover by the Taliban in Afghanistan would normally fit into, or naturally fit into in that sense. There are several pathways. You don't necessarily need to be in Canada, even though that is the popular pathway people seeking refugee protection in Canada usually explore. But it is possible, even though few and far between, for folks to get refugee protection even before coming to Canada. Now, in certain situations, people in Canada may end up being here without status and want to explore their options. Let me see how I'm doing for time. Okay, so if you follow the status in Canada, you may have options to still transition to regularize your status. If you follow the status, you can also always seek a restoration. You've overstayed your visa. There may be options for you to get re-regularized in Canada, depending on your situation. There are also specific programs that Canada has set up to provide a pathway. So what's going on here, right? To provide a pathway for folks who are falling out of status but are also working in certain sectors that have labor shortages, for example, the construction sector in areas like the Greater Toronto area. If you have a job, you've lived in Canada for a period of 5 years and you've fallen out of status and things like that, that may also provide you a pathway to regularize your status in Canada. You may also want to see the possibility of restoring your status if you were a visitor who came into Canada. You may have a compassionate reason why you want Canada to allow you to apply for permanent residence from within Canada when you're falling out of status. Maybe you want to explore the in Canada spousal sponsorship or a preliminary risk assessment. This sort of is sort of related to the Refugee Protection Program, but essentially deals with folks who have concerns of returning to their country when they are facing removal from Canada. That may provide you an option to re-regularize your status in Canada. I talked about this already, so I'll move on from that. This program, the Construction Workers Without Status, has a slot limit of 500 applicants. Those slots have not been completed already. So if you know folks who are falling out of status, work as construction workers, this may offer them a pathway to regularize the status in Canada. Now, again, we've talked about ways to become temporary residents, ways to become permanent residents. There's also what to do when you attain permanent resident status and you want to transition to citizenship. So Canada has that provision whereby folks who have been in Canada for a certain period of time, 3 years, depending on when you got your permanent residence, or depending on the status you had before becoming a permanent resident, it may provide permanent resident, may provide you a pathway to citizenship. But ultimately, you need to have lived in Canada for, I think it's 1,093 days. You must have been filing your taxes, maintained a good civil record in Canada, be able to communicate in the official languages, also pass the test in terms of how well you know Canada, how well you've sort of reintegrated yourself into the system here. And as usual, Canada will always look at things like prohibitions, criminal records, what you've done over the past, which is why I talked about your civil records. As long as those things check out, it may offer you a pathway to citizenship ultimately. Now, Mr. Bala talked about, oh, that's me. Sorry for that. So dealing with rejected immigration applications, again, many people don't have that information to know that whether I'm rejected a visa, whether I'm rejected my refugee claim, whether I'm rejected permanent resident, it may offer me a pathway to challenge that decision. So sometimes you may get the benefit from fighting and resisting because the folks who make the decisions are not, they're not foolproof. They also could make mistakes. So where you get refused whatever immigration application you made, it's important to explore your opportunities to challenge those if those things do not check out in terms of what the law provides as requirements. In addition to what I just said, most immigration decisions which are made by administrative decision makers can be challenged by what we call judicial review, which essentially is taking the issue to the court and making an argument as to why that decision is unreasonable, given the evidence that was put before the officer in that sense. Again, Mr. Babala talked about this in terms of appeals. If you make a refugee claim, depending on your particular circumstances, you may have a right of appeal to seek an appeal of the refusal of a refugee claim. But again, with most immigration applications, it's important to create that distinction that most immigration applications would be challengeable by way of judicial review rather than an appeal. Talking all of this. Right. Folks who ultimately get permanent residence status and possibly lose it for some reason or the other, you've not met the residency requirements, you've not lived in Canada for, I believe, 730 days within the last 5 years from the time you applied. If you don't meet those 730 days of residence and you don't have a humanitarian and compassionate reason why you did not meet the residency requirements, you may ultimately lose your status. And you could also lose your status for all sorts of other reasons, but important to note that you can challenge the loss of your PR status on appeal to the Immigration Appeal Division within 30 days from getting that notice that your appeal or your status has been lost. Talked about this. Right, okay, I'm just going to touch on this shortly. So certain people make refugee protection applications to Canada, and for some reason or the other, they do not declare all members of their family. Canada has a program which it's a public policy program that allows you at the point of, or at the point you attain permanent residence, after getting permanent residence, you then want to sponsor members of your family who you did not mention at the point you got permanent residence, either through being a refugee applicant, refugee claimant rather, or someone who has been sponsored to come to Canada. You may be able to take advantage of this public policy to name and sponsor those family members who you did not mention in your original PR application. Also, if you're a foreign worker who's in Canada and you've been subjected to some form of abuse, people are taking advantage of you in an abusive situation, you may be able to take advantage of this program to get a work permit that is for a short period of time and that can provide you a pathway to sort of regularize your status out of that vulnerable situation that you're facing. So for example, you're being sponsored by somebody who's abusing you, or you've got a work permit to work for an employer who has put you in an abusive situation. This may provide you a way out. I also mentioned earlier that with the pandemic, there were several programs that have either ended or are ending now, which the government of Canada put in place to provide a pathway to increase the numbers of people who are transitioning to PR here in Canada. For example, folks who were in Canada at, I believe it was August 24 of 2020, were in Canada as visitors, were allowed to transition to a work permit for a limited period of time. So if a person had gotten what is called a labor market impact assessment, that person may have been able to transition, or you got a job in an occupation that is not labor market impact assessment applicable, you may have a pathway to transition to work permit if you are taking advantage of that. For folks who are falling out of status as well during the pandemic, Canada provided what we'll call a moratorium beyond the 90 days. So normally you have 90 days from when you fall out of status to seek restoration of status, but Canada extended that. I believe that ended sometime in August of this year. There were also programs that were launched this year to appreciate people who had worked as essential workers during the pandemic in Canada, whether it's as healthcare workers, essential workers, people who work in the food supply chain, food packaging sectors, in the malls, in grocery stores and things like that. Those occupations were considered to be essential work during the pandemic, kept the economy alive. It provided a pathway for people, whether it's international graduates, essential workers, or healthcare workers. It, however, had a limited number of people. For example, international graduates had a slot of, I think, about 40,000. Essential workers had 30,000. The healthcare workers had maybe 20,000. For the healthcare workers, those numbers have not been completed as of yet. The international graduate slots have been completed. Essential workers have been completed. So for folks who are still thinking about that, you still have a window between now and November 5th, which is next week Friday, to take advantage of that. If you work in the healthcare sector, you've taken the English exam and you've gotten a certain point, I think it's 5, the Canadian language benchmark of 5 in the English test, you can apply under that pathway. There's also another pathway for folks who are proficient in French. So, for example, I saw in the chat at the beginning of this conversation, somebody from Benin. So we have people who, regardless of where you're originally from, maybe you've lived somewhere in a Francophone country, you have proficiency in French, you're able to also get a certain level, which is an average performance in French. It could provide you a pathway through the French programs to transition to permanent residence in Canada. What is different between the English program as well as the French program is that the English program has a limited number of slots, but the French programs, it's unlimited. But the interesting thing is, compared to the English programs, those numbers are still low. I checked that, I believe it was yesterday, we were seeing in the international graduate sector, maybe about 3,000 applications have been received, 1,600 in essential workers, a very low number as well in the healthcare workers for French-speaking people. So that may also provide a person an avenue to transition to permanent residence if you are able to get a French test exam done between now and next Friday. The program is winding up, but if you've also been following the news about Canada, a new minister of citizenship and immigration was appointed recently. There have been reports in the media, but until the government announces an intention to extend that program, it remains reports in the media that the government is considering the possibility of extending some of this program. So I would say to people, you have a window between now and next week Friday, about a week, to put in your application if you may be eligible for some of the other open pathways that I just talked about as well. So that pretty much is it in a short sense. Immigration is a very detailed thing. The time allotted may not offer us the opportunity to talk about it in detailed sense, but this gives you a general sense of the various pathways, the regular ones, the ones influenced by the pandemic, which have provided a pathway for people to transition to permanent residence. I know that people will have questions, and which is why this program was set up. So we are here as well, myself and Mr. Babula will be going through the questions that people have asked to provide answers to people's specific situations. In putting this to a close, it's important to note, which I should have mentioned at the beginning, our goal here is not to give legal advice. We said at the beginning, we're putting out information. Again, like they say, information is power, knowledge is power. The information that you have from programs like this could help you think about ways you may be able to move to Canada, to take the benefits of the land and also contribute in terms of the economic development of Canada as well. So information, not legal advice. And so with the questions as well, we will not be speaking to people's specific program. Again, this is a public program. It's important to understand confidentiality with yourself and your professional that you're seeking consultation for. So we'll be responding to questions in a general sense and not giving situation-specific advice or information as the case may be. Thank you very much again for the opportunity, and thanks for listening.
Wow, this is so great. Thank you so much, Mr. Tosin Falaye, for the beautiful presentation. I hope we have all learned a lot from all the messages passed across to us. Thank you so much, Eshia Dupesa. God bless you. Please, once again, if you need to ask any question, type your question in the chat box, or you raise your hand by using the emoji sign, please. Permit me to introduce my second speaker again, Mr. Johnson Babalola. I introduce to you the first speaker, Mr. Johnson Babalola, who's also known as JB. Is the group managing partner of McKay Anthony's in Canada. He's a well-known Toronto lawyer who has carved a niche in immigration and refugee law practice. He has appeared before the Federal Court of Canada and a variety of tribunals. He writes on immigration and settlement matters. Johnson Babalola is committed to advocacy for immigrants and quality education for the workforce as a platform for global development. He is a member in good standing of the Law Society of Upper Canada. Over to you, sir, Mr. Johnson Babalola.
Thank you very much, Otumba.
Thank you, sir.
For all the positive statements. The Yorubas will say that Yugiko Ledagoshe. In English, for those who don't speak Yoruba, a tree does not make a forest. I'm very happy that you have just listened to one of our lawyers who is extremely well-spoken, knowledgeable, and erudite. And we have quite a number of them in the office, and some of them are here today. So sometimes when we go through the questions, there are questions that we cannot tackle, and some of them can speak to those. So that's the beauty of working together. So Tosin had gone through all the immigration, programming, most of the immigration programs we have in Canada, and as he said, obviously we cannot go deeper into those programs. Immigration is something that is studied in school for minimum of 6 months, full-time or even part-time, some cases. So we will not be able to do justice to everything, but just know one thing, that there are ins and outs to every programs. There are requirements, there are, so you need to do your homework and ask the right questions. I think the best thing to do right now, because it's just a little bit past 3 here, is to open the floor to questions. So that way we'll be able to explore whatever issues people have in their minds, and we'll be able to do justice to that. So Otumba, if you can just allow questions to come in, that would be great.
Okay, I will do that right now. If you have any question, kindly raise your hand. Mr. Olatun, Prince Olateru, can you see people that raise up their hands over there? I can't see very well. Okay, I've seen. Okay, I would like to call on Mrs. Yemi Foluke. Can you please unmute yourself?
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. And I actually came in a little bit late, but I have a question. I have somebody, let us assume, that we have somebody who wants to come to Canada. He's not a graduate. He only has some, maybe computer, whatever, but it's not a graduate in it. And he only has school certs, as they call it. But I don't know how she can come to Canada. Is it possible to go to school because of the age? He's about 36. Can you tell me something about that?
All right, I can speak to that. Like Tosin said, it's difficult to speak to particular issues, but we will we will generalize. And the reason why we will generalize is that, as you were speaking about this individual, there are 1,001 questions I would have loved to ask this person, because statements like didn't go to school, this and that does not really tell us a lot. But generally speaking, anyone can apply to say, I want to come to Canada to study, even at the age of 60, 70. You have every right to say, okay, I want to come to Canada to come and study. And but there are some things that you need to take into consideration. One of the biggest things that has to be noted is that the issuance of our study permit is at the discretion of the officer. So remember that study permit is just a visiting visa that allows you to study while you are here. So, and that is why sometimes you will see Officer A, if you take the same application before two officers, you might come back with two different responses. One officer might say, you know what, at 36, he's too old. I don't believe that he's coming to study and that kind of thing. While Officer B might say, yeah, that's good. 36, still young, not bad. You can come here. So it's at the discretion of the officer. But having said that, the options are, number one, if this individual has some skill set, some work experience, and is able to get an employer in Canada who is willing to bring him or her in as a worker, who is most often willing to do LMIA, labor market impact assessment. What that means basically is that they have to show that there are no Canadians here who can really do the job before they bring this individual in from overseas. That's one option. Again, the other option is the student visa that we were talking about, meaning that this individual must show, first of all, that he or she is a genuine student. He or she wants to come here and study. And then that's the primary reason. And secondly, must meet some of the criteria in place. No admissibility problems, meaning that there are no serious health issues. There are no criminal issues, and has enough money to cover the period of study, not just the tuition, but the accommodation as well, and the living expenses. Must also have genuine documents that will speak to his past, his present, and what he wants to do in future. So he or she needs to look for a school. Once he gets a school, he can apply for. I'm just going to use E now, just to make it easy. He will apply for a study visa. Again, submitting all the documents and answering all the questions truthfully, and proving that he or she has the money or has a sponsor. Must be able to speak to the sponsor. If there's a sponsor, the sponsor must be able to speak to their relationship. Why am I investing in this person? What's the relationship between us? So all those things are important in putting together. Again, like I said, we can't go into full detail, but those are the kind of options that this individual will have. The other option, which is practical, in my opinion, is the For many, many years. I came to Canada since 1998, and way before I even came here in 1998. The process for skilled worker is that if you are educated and you have some work experience and all those, you might be able to come to Canada. So if this individual wants to go back to school to study and then have some education, or if he or she is married and the spouse is younger with some education, maybe first degree, master's degree, the spouse can apply as a principal applicant and then add him as a sub-applicant, as a spouse. So there are so many options that can be explored and looked at. And so in a nutshell, that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you, sir. Next question from someone from, sir?
Please,
yeah.
Let's take the questions on the chat.
Yes, that's what I want to do. I'll be interchange one from live, one from the chat. That's what I want to be doing.
Okay.
Yes. So someone from Malaysia said, how can someone take a child born with spina bifida to Canada for further treatment?
Tosin, you want to take that?
From Malaysia.
So again, speaking in a general sense, for a person who is outside of Canada and possibly needs medical treatment here, that could provide you a reason to visit Canada. So, for example, you've been able to consult, say, a consultant, you possibly met somebody from the University Health Network, consultant has possibly done a virtual consultation with you, and you need further examination that can only be done in Canada. If you're able to get a letter from the doctors to show that there's that important need for that person to seek medical care here, you're able to show that you have the funds to provide for that care, whether it's in terms of medical insurance or you have your own personal funds, maybe you've paid the consultant in advance and all of that. You're able to show that you're a genuine visitor to Canada coming for a specific purpose, this purpose being to seek healthcare. You may be able to successfully get a visitor's visa to come to Canada to get that healthcare. As long as you're able to show that you return at the end of the day, that I consider to be the way to get that child here to get that healthcare attention that is needed.
Yeah, and I can add to that as well, that there are also situations whereby those who don't have money, but who will have appealed to pity, meaning that who will have gotten in touch. Let's take, for instance, Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto, who had been in touch with an NGO in Malaysia or wherever, and they have taken on this as a cause, and they basically had written to the hospital here, and they're willing to assist, and so sometimes, it's not often, once in a while, those kind of people might also be able to bring such a child to Canada based on the fact that there's an hospital here that is agreed to treat that child, on humanitarian grounds, so to say. And so that's something that is also possible. But generally speaking, like Tosin said, yeah, you need to show that you have the money and that there is a medical referral from someone locally who had referred you to a consultant here, and then take it from there. All right.
Thank you, sir. Next question from the chat before I go on to the someone from Ibadan, Adewusi from Ibadan, Nigeria. He said, can I apply for a work permit in Canada without LMIA? Can I apply for a work permit in Canada without LMIA? From Adewusi, Canada, Ibadan. I don't know what it means by LMIA. I'm not a lawyer.
Okay, sure. So yeah, I know what it means by LMIA. LMIA basically means Labor Market Impact Assessment. And so to put that in very simple terms, it is an assessment done by the government of Canada that concludes that giving the job opportunity to a foreigner or a foreign national does not negatively impact a Canadian citizen or a Canadian permanent resident. So again, for you to bring somebody from outside of the country, Canada wants to know that is there nobody in Canada who can do that job, who has status here? So Canada doesn't want a situation whereby citizens and permanent residents have nothing to do while foreign nationals are coming in. putting that in similar balance with Nigeria, that you may call that, I think there's a local content act that provides that, deals with things like that in the Nigerian context, whereby if you're bringing people outside, you ultimately want to train the local people to ultimately take that over. So that's the same way. Every country has those sort of protectionist policies that keeps the jobs, takes care of the folks inside first before giving people outside. But in a general sense, right now, like I referred to the Premier of Ontario, who had talked about labor shortages. There's a lot of labor shortages happening in Canada at the moment, given the pandemic and things like that, right? So for you to be able to come into Canada without an LMIA, it's a function of what job are you coming to do in Canada. So yes, you can apply for a work permit from outside of Canada, provided the job you are applying for or the job you're coming to do or seeking a work permit for does not require you to have an LMIA. For example, if you're coming to Canada as a caregiver, I talked about that earlier, either as a personal support worker or as a child care provider, those jobs are LMIA exempt. If you're coming to Canada to say, become a missionary, maybe a pastor or a job as a clergy, those jobs are also LMIA exempt. So depending on the kind of job you are applying or you got offered an opportunity for, you may be able to come to Canada for that. There's a list of jobs that are LMIA exempt based either on the relationship between Canada and that particular country, whether it's NAFTA or the USMCA as it's now called. Again, the first things first is, what kind of occupation have I been employed for? Is that occupation LMIA exempt? If LMIA exempt, why not? You can go ahead and apply for your work.
Thank you so much, sir. Next person is Oluwo Bairoi. Can you
sorry,
please go ahead with your...
Sorry, Otumba, just before you, so I can just chip in, and Tosin has covered that pretty well. But just to again reiterate that, you know, some jobs that are LMI exempt, some of those ones that he had already mentioned. There are some jobs that are designated by the minister, the immigration minister, maybe as a researcher. So think about this. You know, during COVID, maybe there was a need to bring someone in from Nigeria to help with doing some research into COVID and things like that. They would not be going through LMIA process for that, because that would take a while. So those are there are jobs like that. There are also jobs that are subject to the interest of Canada in terms of the cultural interest of Canada, the social interest of Canada, the economic interest of Canada. So, for instance, if you're an artist, and I know that Otumba is an artist, and she just came out with a movie. But if you're an artist and you needed to move to Canada, that kind of thing, or someone like King Sunny Ade, or someone who is prominent as a writer, creative artist, you don't need LMIA to come here as self-employed person. So there are quite a number of them. Again, it's always good to consult with someone who can ask you questions, send you a questionnaire, you complete it, and then based on what you have provided, we'll be able to say, okay, you can actually come to Canada through this means without going through LMIA. All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next person is Mr. Oluwo Bairoi. Can you go ahead, sir?
Well, I don't mind to go ahead, but I just want to make an observation. There's somebody before me.
Okay.
No,
she has answered. No, she's answered a question. She already answered.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. My name is Femi Shodunke. Well,
yeah.
My question is this: there are a lot of, Nigerians, and even not only Nigerians, a lot of people who are here, who are permanent, residents, by virtue of refugee, claimant. But we've had stories that anybody in that category cannot travel back to the home country. Then we've also heard that the person can travel after 10 years or so. So, and if that in that situation, the principle of cessation, does it apply if that person should travel back home? And secondly, if that person eventually become a Canadian citizen, can he or she travel at that point in time without any problem, like issue of cessation. Thank you very much, sir.
All right, Tosin, you want to take that?
Yeah, I can give it the first shot, and yeah. So with respect to at what point a person who is protected, the implication of getting protected in Canada is that you have been able to successfully show the refugee board that your country is unable to protect you, and therefore Canada lets you stay here indefinitely because this is a safer environment and things like that. The implication of going back to your country, and going back to your country could depend on various things. You could, for example, apply for a passport of that country, travel back to that country with that passport. As long as by your conduct, it can be established that you've re-availed yourself of the protection of your country, Canada considers that there's no reason to continue to protect you, since now from your conduct and the actions you've taken, the country can continue to protect you. So in a general sense, the person who has said, this country cannot protect me, should refrain from doing that. And that's why that when I protect a person in Canada in a general sense, Canada gives you a travel document. A travel document specifically says that does not allow you travel to that country. So if by your conduct, the minister can establish those things, then you'll be subjected to vacation proceedings, cessation of protection, and things like that. With respect to the comment about 10 years, I would say that it's always open to, I'm not aware of any limitation in the law as to when the minister can bring an application for cessation of protection or vacation of the refugee protection status. So regardless of the number of years, that option is always still open to the minister. It is evidence to find that you now have either taken steps to establish yourself in your country, to be settled, re-avail yourself, like I said earlier. So I would say, there's a written version of that question here. Right, so as long as it's a function of conduct, whether you have become a citizen, in my opinion, you have still a permanent resident who then went to Nigeria based on your Nigerian passport, or you, for example, go to travel in between the ECOWAS states and the Canadian government discovers that, it gives them a ground to bring that application to vacate your protection. So even if you have a Canadian passport, for example, you go back to Nigeria, get a Nigerian passport, it could still bring that application possible. But the question is, will the minister succeed? That's a whole different question, and the minister will have to establish, based on the requirements of the law, as this person made themselves available for Nigeria to protect. For example, we're talking about Nigeria, is there anything in their conduct to show? So even if a vacation proceedings is brought against you, if you're able to show that there are overriding circumstances that do not show that you have re-availed yourself or resettled, you are now protected by the government of your country, it remains arguable whether or not that application will succeed. But I would say, from my understanding of the law as of today, the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration can always bring that application. But when a person becomes a Canadian citizen, those chances become dimmer, especially when you're traveling on your Canadian passport.
Yeah, I totally agree with your submission. I think out there, again, because in practice, the minister does not generally bring such applications against those who hold Canadian passports. I think for some reason people think that the minister cannot do it. There's nothing in law that says the minister cannot bring such an application to take back, to lift the veil, so as to say, on the Canadian passport first, and then that person becomes a permanent resident, they lift the veil on that. That person becomes a refugee, confidential refugee, they lift the veil on that, they take that away. So one has to always be careful. For permanent residents, actually, that's the worst. That one is easy. Anyone that re-avails. And like Tosin said, it's not just about, for permanent residents, it's not just about even going back to that country. If you had approached that country, so let's say, for instance, you made a refugee claim against Nigeria, that you say the Nigerian government were after you and afraid of this, afraid of the police, then soon after you got you become a conventional refugee, then boom, you went to Ottawa, you got a Nigerian passport, and that by itself, even without going to Nigeria, could cause problem. for that person, because that means that individual had availed himself or herself of the protection of Nigeria, the same country you say you're afraid of going, you have just gone there. So again, depending on individual cases, people should always seek for professional advice, again, based on their own situation, that kind of thing, and and talk to lawyers and before they make decisions. I mean, they take steps and everything, because how A is treated might not be the way B might be treated in situations like this. That's why I always say to people, oh, my brother has a Canadian passport, traveled, I can do it. It doesn't mean that you will get away with it, because again, officers have every right to bring actions. They might not do it, but they may also do it. All right.
Next question,
sorry, ma'am. I just want to add to that. Someone may be thinking, okay, so if I get a Nigerian passport, what could possibly happen? Just to create an hypothetical situation. You haven't gone to Nigeria, you have a Nigerian passport that you're traveling the world with. For example, you get a Nigerian passport and you travel on your Nigerian passport to Jamaica. When you go into Jamaica, you're admitted as a Nigerian because of your passport. If something goes wrong with you in Jamaica, it's the Nigerian embassy or the Nigerian consulate in Jamaica they'll be looking out for. So that is a way where your conduct can show you've made yourself in a position where the Nigerian government is the one to take care of you, for example. So again, that gives you a sense that it's not just going to Nigeria that could put you in trouble in that sense.